Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our program today. For the three people who don't know, my name is Ray Comiskey. I'm president here at Jefferson College, and again, it's great to see you, and we appreciate you joining us for what I think is going to be a really great program. I assume everyone here loves rap music? Oh no, that's not what we're playing. I'm sorry, that's not what we're playing today. So appreciate that. A couple of things before we get started. First, I want to remind everybody, because I've seen folks admiring along the way, but in this room we do post Mastodon art on the wall, so if you get a chance, please enjoy that. That's from area and regional high school students, some outstanding work, and it does get rotated in and out, so it's kind of fun to see. We also earlier in the year had a program regarding our women's basketball team, and just wanted to remind you that tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock we do have a game here on campus. So if you like what you saw and you wanted a good sports warm-up to the Super Bowl while we have a basketball game on Saturday, get to go on. So I wanted to acknowledge a couple people. First of all, of course, Dr. Ray Henry, former president, and his wife are here today, so always good to see you. And I've been reminded, and now I get to embarrass him, that retired Professor Richard Pierce is sitting right next to him. So there you go. Yeah, well, you know, after 3 times Richard nudging me, I said I better no. It's great. We appreciate he comes all the time. So we've got a great program for you today. So I won't talk too much, but you know, I approached this program and I thought to myself, how can you tell when somebody's really passionate about what they do? And I think we'll see that answer today as we listen to Joel Vanderheyden, who's professor of music here and is sort of re-energizing our jazz program here. Now, I'll give you a little disclaimer. I have a daughter who's in high school who's a jazz trumpet player. And so, by default, neglect, and whatnot, she also plays a community band here. I get to go to a lot of concerts, and everywhere I go, I see Joel. And we held the district music contest here at the college, and Joel was here all the time and working with the students and enjoying listening to them play. And then I was at Lake of the Ozarks last weekend for the Missouri Music Educators Award, the state bands, and Joel was there with some of our students, and everywhere you go, you run into Joel. And I think that's just one of the measures by which you see how passionate and excited he is, not only for his music, but to work with students. So, I'll tell you a little bit about his background, and then we'll turn the program over to him. Joel has degrees in saxophone performance and pedagogy from the University of Iowa, a Master's in Jazz Studies from the University of Maryland, and Music Performance and Education bachelor's degree from the University of Minnesota, which is his home state. He's a seasoned performer and educator in both jazz and classical styles. Here at the college, he teaches a number of courses, including music theory, but he also directs the college jazz ensemble. Joel was previously served as director of jazz at both the University of Minnesota Morris and Oakton Community Colleges in the Chicago area. He's performed at jazz festivals in Switzerland, France, Holland, and notable stateside venues including Carnegie Hall, Blues Alley, the Dakota, the Artist Quarter, the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, and the Stephen Sondheim Center for Performing Arts. So I guess you're okay. He also has his first CD out, which was quoted was voted the top jazz album of 2009 by KCCK in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and was called one of the best jazz rock records to be released in years by Christopher Cook on KIOS in Omaha, Nebraska. Without further ado, we help me welcome Joel Vanderheyden.
Not sure if I need this, but I'll use it anyway. I figured I'd play a little bit because I'm not really sure what I'll say, so that's a little bit easier than talking. But thank you all for coming out. It's nice to see so many people here, and I'm sorry that whatever you thought was going to be here is not here today, but I'm happy to be here for you. As Dr. Comiskey said, I teach a number of classes here at Jefferson College, and it has been a real treat for me to be here working with the students that I have. And I feel very fortunate and just blessed to have such wonderful kids to work with. And I get to interact with them in a number of different arenas. I direct some of the ensembles. We have a 20-piece jazz big band here on campus. We have a couple small jazz combos that are about 5 or 6 students each. And of course, other ensembles that I'm not involved in directing, but enjoy going to the concerts, the choirs and community band and all that as well. So, and then I also teach music theory, and so they get to listen to me turn music into mathematics, which is fun, and wrap their heads around different chords and things like that. And I just recently started a jazz improvisation course here this semester, so we've been having a lot of fun with that class, and the kids are really doing excellent work. Some of the things I've been having them do, they've been listening to recordings of famous jazz musicians and transcribing the solos so that they can play along with the recordings, and many of them have never done that before, and it's been really cool to kind of watch them grow and start to grab onto things and understand the jazz language a little bit better. And it just reminds me of my journey and all the kind of steps that I had to go through and take part in to be where I am right now, and I'm still doing those things. So I thought I'd give you maybe a little bit of background just on me as a person, and if at any time you have questions, please ask, because it will make me less nervous to be here talking in front. So I currently live in Fenton, Missouri. We just moved here 2 years ago when I began teaching here at Jefferson, and I have a lovely wife and 2 daughters that are 4 and 2 years old, and my wife is pregnant and due with our baby boy in May. Thank you. That's the family world, and of course I met my wife when we were both students at the University of Minnesota, and she played clarinet in high school, but I was definitely more serious about the music, and it was just kind of a fun activity for her. And so we met freshman year in college, and her friend convinced her to play in the jazz band, and so she picked up a tenor saxophone and was playing in one of the jazz bands, and that's how we met. And then she never played an instrument again after that. So she fooled me, but it worked. And so yeah, when I was younger, this saxophone, somebody was, I think Tom maybe was asking me how old this saxophone was, because it looks like it came out of a garbage dump behind my college. But the saxophone was made in the 1950s, and it's an old instrument, and it kind of reminds me of my very first saxophone, which was also kind of that era, although certainly not as nice of an instrument. But I remember my mom asking me when I was, I I guess the usual age, elementary school, maybe 4th grade or something around there, if I wanted to learn an instrument to play in band in school. And I said, I had heard saxophone on the radio, and I thought that would be a really neat instrument to play. And so I told her that, and it just so happened that a week later she was at a neighbor's garage sale down the street and found this used alto saxophone that I think one of their kids or grandkids had played. And so she picked it up and brought it home. And I remember the first time I opened that case, and it's just, the saxophone, even though it's considered a woodwind instrument, is made of brass. It's a woodwind because we use a reed, and our air vibrates the reed, and that's what makes the sound. The brass just is the body of the instrument and helps project the sound. And but I remember opening that case, and if you've ever had anything made of brass stuffed in a case for a really long time, that's just that metallic smell kind of came out. And it was terrible, but at the same time, I loved it. You know, it was like, oh, wow, what is this moldy, metally smell that's coming out of here? And I pulled it out of the case, and I remember putting the neck on, because I could figure that out. And then I had the mouthpiece, and the reed, and the ligature, which is the thing that straps it on. But I had no idea, for some reason, I couldn't figure out how to put all those things in the right way to make it. So I'm sitting there with this instrument, and I can't try and make a sound on it because I don't know how to put the thing together. So my first lesson was, here's how you put it together. And so that was really cool. And I was fortunate, you know, I've been fortunate enough throughout my life and career playing music to meet a lot of really special people. And the very first, musically anyway, very first special person that I met was my saxophone teacher in 5th grade, Scott Johnson, who worked at Schmidt Music in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. And I remember taking that first lesson with him, and he showed me how to put it together, and I studied with him for a year. And looking back now, I realized just, you know, he would always tell my mom, oh yeah, he's really doing great, he's a wonderful student, and I'm just kind of rolling my eyes like, oh geez, and my mom's going, oh, he says you're great, isn't that wonderful? I was like, oh, he says that about everybody. And then I realized the stuff, you know, looking back now, as I've had students that are that age and many of them older, the types of material that he was having me work on. I mean, I was playing out of, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the saxophonist Charlie Parker. He was one of the founders of the bebop movement in jazz in the 1940s, and was famous for playing just daredevil style licks on the saxophone, really fast flurries of notes and really difficult chord changes and things like that. And he had me reading these Charlie Parker melodies and solos when I was in 5th grade, and looking back, I'm like, what was I doing? And then I got into the school band program, and I just kind of took a nosedive. I wasn't really challenged to that degree. I mean, I wouldn't have expected myself to be, but I'll never forget Scott Johnson. And I saw him a number of years later, and I just, you know, I told him thank you, and he was still there teaching saxophone lessons, you know, to future generations. It was a pretty cool thing. So, and then I went on to college, and as I said, met my wife at the University of Minnesota, and I met a couple of other special people there. One of whom is a guy by the name of Chris Vidala, and he was a saxophonist that has done a number of things, but probably his most notable achievement was when he toured with the Chuck Mangione band. Some of you familiar with that trumpet player? And Chris toured with Chuck for a number of years, and occasionally still gets together with him. But he's a great saxophonist and plays all the woodwinds. I mean, he plays bassoon and bass clarinet and alto flute and all these ridiculous instruments, plays them all extremely well. And he came out to Minnesota, and I remember meeting him two different occasions when he came out to play with our jazz ensemble out there. And he just struck me because, you know, you meet people that are really, really talented at what they do. And some of them are so focused on that that they kind of, their personal skills kind of go out the window. Some of us may know people like that. But he was just the opposite of that. I mean, he was such a giving, generous, warm person. And, you know, a lot of times I remember being younger and you'd meet somebody that was really famous, a famous musician, and it was kind of, oh yes, very nice to meet you. I don't want to say the wrong thing or whatever. And I remember going up to him and I said, "Oh, Mr. Vidala, it's so wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for coming out to play with our band." He said, "Mr. Vidala, that's my dad's name. I'm Chris." And so from that point, it was just like, oh, cool, he's Chris. And we hit it off and really just had a wonderful time while he was in Minnesota. And I thought, man, he's such a tremendous player and such a nice guy. It would be really cool to study with him. And I was thinking about graduate schools, but I was in Minnesota, from Minnesota, born and raised, and he taught at the University of Maryland, which was a little bit of a hike from Minnesota. And I remember my grandmother actually telling me, she said, "Joel, I think you need to email that Chris Vidala." I don't know. She was at one of the concerts, I think, that he was playing with us. And I thought, well, I guess it wouldn't hurt. And so I sent him an email, and we had several exchanges, and I went out, and that's where I ended up doing my master's degree. And he was able to hook me up with a nice assistantship. I had my schooling paid for, and being that I was just married about a month before that was really nice because my wife didn't have a job yet out there. And he remains to this day one of those really special people. And as a matter of fact, I'm hoping that he'll be able to, I'm trying to work on getting him out here to the campus next spring. So hopefully that will happen, and he'll come work with my students. Another one of those people was a guy that we did have out last year on this campus, a guy by the name of Byron Stripling, who impacted me when he again came out to solo with our band in Minnesota. And I remember Byron gave this clinic during his time there. And it really wasn't you go into a clinic by a musician, you expect to say, well, he's going to tell me what notes I need to play over these chords, or tell me how to hold my instrument more properly or something. And he didn't even bring his horn in. He had this clinic, and he did the same thing here. And it was like the greatest motivational speech you've ever heard. And that's what made me decide to make music my major area of study and to pursue it and never look back. And so I wanted to bring Byron here last year because I felt that there were a lot of students in my program and even around campus that I see that are they're looking for that little spark that'll just kind of get them going and never look back and just start pursuing what they want to do with all of their heart. And he came and gave that almost the same talk, I think, from years ago last spring, and it was really, really neat to see all the students kind of react to that and respond to that, just like I had. And then the third person that I met while I was in Minnesota was a guy by the name of Kenneth Che, and he came out to do a guest recital and got to know him. And he's a classical saxophonist and currently teaches at the University of Iowa. And based on that relationship, I was in touch with Kenneth many years after we initially met, and that's how I ended up going to the University of Iowa to study with him. And so, all these musical relationships are there's something about playing music with someone and sharing that experience that it's almost like you've been friends for 10 years, in a span of a day. You can form a similar bond like that. And so that was another example of that. So I got to go study with Kenneth for a number of years, and then after Iowa, I made it down to Missouri here to hang out with all of you today. So I'm not really sure. Are there any? Yes, sir.
Somebody told me years ago, I don't know if this is true or not, that's why I'm asking you, that anybody who plays wind instruments with any degree of regularity and intensity has perpetually loose front teeth.
It depends on how hard you bite down on the mouthpiece. I could see that, though. I mean, it's definitely, my teeth spend a lot of time on the top of that mouthpiece, so I don't think mine are terribly loose. But maybe I'm not practicing enough.
A very phony technique on his part.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
what persuaded you to move from the land of Green Bay down to the land of the Rams? Sort of good and bad.
Well, I was already in the middle. I was hanging out in Iowa, and they don't have any professional football teams, so you know. Yeah, right. So, but you know, to tell you the truth, it's been really nice. As you get into this field, teaching in higher education, in music especially, I think, because there are so few music positions at every institution, or at most of them. It's really kind of a roll of the dice where you may end up. And of all the places that I could have ended up, you know, a lot of these schools are kind of just, you know, you never even heard of this place before. I mean, this has been a real blessing to come here because not only am I near all these wonderful people working with these wonderful students, I'm near the great city of St. Louis and all the musical opportunities that has to offer, but I'm also still only 4 hours away from all my friends and colleagues at the University of Iowa. And in fact, I've been up there a number of times and still been able to do a lot of things with them. Last summer, they have a big jazz festival up there every summer. And last summer, I was able to go up and perform in, they called it, I think, the Iowa All-Stars Big Band or something, and featuring Count Basie's former vocalist, Carmen Bradford. We were playing all the Frank Foster arrangements and Count Basie arrangements. And she sang, and that was one of my highlights, being able to play with her and all those wonderful musicians that I actually grew up idolizing. Some of those guys from Iowa that teach at the University of Northern Iowa and some of the other schools, and it was a real treat. So, yeah. Any other? Yes.
Do you find that some of the high school students who are coming here as freshmen already have a good jazz background, or some good high school jazz programs in the county?
Absolutely. I think it's like any county that, you know, it kind of runs the gamut in terms of you know, how much experience students have. There are some students. There are a couple students that played, you know, in the all-state jazz band that are from this area and are just phenomenal players. There are some students that have never taken a private lesson ever in their life when they come to study here, and but some of those same students that haven't had maybe some of the opportunities that the others have. You know, I have a couple students right now that are in that position, but they have so much potential, and they're going after it right now, and it's really cool to see and to know that it was just lying there untapped for years and years, and then, you know, you just give them the right piece of music to work on, or the right, you know, say the right thing to them to kind of motivate them a little bit, and it's like they're unleashed and they go after it, and yeah, it's really very exciting for me. So, yes, sir.
Your experience is very much like a roommate of mine. He was playing clarinet, and he wanted that because they needed clarinets, and he always had a place, and he didn't have to do a lot of the grunt work that the rest of us did. And he, all of a sudden, I fell in love with it. I hadn't counted on that.
It is, you know, it's funny. You never know what that little thing is that's going to just flip the switch. I mean, I've always enjoyed playing the saxophone from the early days in 5th grade with studying with Scott, and all throughout high school and all that. I enjoyed it very much. But I came to college and I was an undecided major. I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I think in the back of my mind, I felt music was what I wanted to do, but I was always, you know, I've always been the type of person, well, I don't think I'm not good enough yet. There are all these people, I would hear people when I'd go visit schools in the practice rooms and think, oh man, they sound amazing, you know. And so I just never thought it, but then as the more time I spent in that session with Byron Stripling, it was just, said, all right, this is what I'm going to do, and committed to it. But that's interesting. Yes?
The saxophone that you play for us, is that the same one that your mom bought you when you were in the...
No, it's not. I do still have that. The one that my mom bought me. Yep, it's at home. It's an alto saxophone, which is a little bit smaller. This is a tenor saxophone, and there are kind of four popular types of saxophone: the soprano, the alto, the tenor, and the baritone. And you see most of those. The soprano not as much, but you see most of those in a typical like jazz big band. And then there are some, for all the saxophone nerds, there are contrabass saxophone and all these various that are just ridiculous sounding, but they look kind of cool. Yeah, but no, I do still have that horn, and I'm debating what I want to do with that. I don't know if either my daughters or my son someday wanted to play. Maybe I'd get it fixed up for them, or maybe I'll just kind of turn it into something. I don't know. But there you go, hang it on the wall. So, yes.
Is there something special about 50s saxophone?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there are some saxophones that were made in the 1950s that are complete garbage. But this particular model, I actually went, when I lived in Chicago, I taught at Oakton Community College, and I worked part-time at a really fine vintage saxophone shop that just happened to be 3 blocks from my apartment. And I literally did not know that until after I had signed the lease and moved in. And I thought, wow, this is really fate. And so I worked part-time for him, and he had a guy that dealt vintage horns out of his home in Boston that supplies all these, a lot of the really big name guys, saxophonists would come to this guy and try out a bunch of horns. And I remember, because at the time my folks lived in Boston, and so I went out to visit them and went over to this guy's house, and he literally had this. Well, his basement was full of saxophones, but then he had sort of this playing room in his house that was just wall to wall, floor to ceiling shelves packed with saxophone cases, all the way, floor to ceiling, all the way around. And he came up to me, and there have been a number, as with automobiles and other things, there have been a number of types, makes, models of saxophones over the years. So you can imagine, and he said, tell me any type of saxophone you want to play, and I'll bring you at least 10 of them to try out. And so, needless to say, I was at his house for quite a long time. But I ended up picking this one, and this is a Selmer Mark VI, which is kind of like the Excalibur of saxophones in many saxophonist size. But I played some Mark VIs at his place that I wasn't really that impressed with too, but this one I fell in love with. And just to be sure, my wife is, very, I'm the type of person, I would maybe impulse buy something like that, and she said, nope, you're gonna go home, you're gonna think about it, and you're gonna come back, and then you can buy it. And so I had to convince this guy to hold this horn for me. Well, I flew back to Minneapolis and then flew back out to Boston another time, and he held it for me. So, but it was good. Yes?
Coincidentally, my granddaughter started, she's 5th grade, and she started beginning band in the fall with an alto sax. But I don't know how she knows that's the right instrument for her, or she wouldn't know how to pick one. It's kind of a rent-to-own thing.
The right saxophone or instrument in general, you mean?
Yeah, instrument in general, or even specifically, if they have a good instrument and I don't know anything about it. I play the piano myself.
Well, I'll say the saxophone is one of the easiest instruments to play poorly. It's very easy to get a sound. I could pass this around. I won't do it, but I could pass this around, and every single one of you could blow. All you have to do is be able to exhale. You could just go, and some kind of sound would come out. It might not be great, but something would come out. So, the saxophone is a popular instrument for younger kids, and many kids, I don't know if they do that in the elementary programs around here, but when I was in elementary school, we learned recorder. Anyone ever played a recorder? And a lot of the fingerings carry over and are pretty similar. So I remember learning saxophone, and that's just like the recorder fingerings. And so it's a pretty easy instrument to play. And alto is most popular for younger kids just because it's a little bit smaller and just more manageable. The tenor, it probably doesn't look big when I hold it, but it's a pretty large instrument. And for a young kid to sling a tenor, or even you see these young kids with baritone saxophones, which are about that high off the ground. And it's pretty comical. and it takes a little bit less air because the tube itself is shorter, so they don't have to have quite the lung power that older kids have. So, yes.
Your comment about walking past a room where people were playing and saying how wonderful that sounded, it reminds me of an amusing story, or at least amusing me. This is a little bit convoluted, but when I was in graduate school at WashU, I met this fellow and his wife from Arkansas. Some years later, they moved her widowed, the wife's widowed mother to Webster Groves, and it turned out her house was right across the street from one of the members of the St. Louis Orchestra. I think he played French horn, but I'm not sure. Well, the mother would frequently tell me, I would go visit her a lot, she'd frequently say, oh, you ought to hear Larry Strebe play his French horn. It's just so wonderful. Because he would go upstairs and leave his bedroom window open and play, and she could hear it. So she also would say this to her daughter. Well, finally, the daughter one day went over and stood outside Larry Strebe's house. And when she went back to visit her mother, the mother said, well, how'd you like his music? Well, he must have been just running through scales or something. She said, didn't sound like anything special to her.
It's all in the ear of the beholder, I guess. Yes.
Hey, Joel, now you've said the term jazz big band, which talks a little bit about the history of jazz. It's kind of storied and kind of, it's very, takes a lot of paths. So I was wondering if you wanted to comment a little bit on that, but really what I want to get to is the point of why jazz is an important educational process. We heard about that last weekend.
Sure. Well, I could talk about the history of jazz for several hours, but I won't. But essentially, jazz was kind of born it was born in New Orleans, sort of. I mean, there were different kind of things happening in different parts of the country, but that was kind of the primary focus, just because all the right elements were coming together. And a lot of the earlier jazz was based in small groups, or relatively smaller groups, and then the size of those groups kind of grew in the late teens and early 20s. And then you started getting these, a lot of the big bands that we're familiar with, like the Count Basie Band and the Ellington Fletcher Henderson and Benny Goodman's band, who ended up taking a lot of Fletcher Henderson's arrangements and using them for his band. And then in the 40s, it kind of went back to sort of that small group focus. As I said, Charlie Parker, he kind of helped pioneer, along with Thelonious Monk and Kenny Clark and some of those guys, that small group, really intense, acrobatic kind of style of playing. And then, there are so many different things to talk about. But the nice thing about having these kind of two general formats where you talk about the big band and then the small combo style of playing is that big band is easier for the way our current education system is set up, especially in high schools and middle schools. Kids are used to playing in band or orchestra or singing in choir with lots of other kids, and they're reading music. And in a big band setting, a lot of it is reading music. Now, focusing on style and things that are appropriate to that idiom, but still reading music. Whereas the combo is more focused on improvisation. We have melodies, like the tune I played at the beginning was Victor Young, I think. It's called Softly as in a Morning Sunrise. And I play the melody, and then the rest of that, pretty much until I played the melody again at the end, was improvisation. And so small group playing is really focused on improvisation, which is something that many students don't get in any other arena, where you give them some chords and you say, all right, go, do something, play with it. And that's one of the things we're working on in improvisation class this semester is how do you take that information and just create on the spot? What are some things you need to know? What are some things that you can practice in order to just spontaneously compose as the music is happening, which is a really frightening thing for a lot of people. Even for me, standing up here and say, all right, well, you're going to give a talk, what are you going to say? And I really had no idea what I was going to say. It probably shows. But I had no idea what I was really going to say when I came up here, but I just kind of thought of a couple of things and improvised around those topics. So a lot of us do that in our daily lives, maybe not on a musical instrument, but we're used to doing that But when it comes to music, for some reason, we've been reading music so long. You know, when you play in band as a kid or anything like that, you're reading, and suddenly there's nothing to read, and you can kind of freeze up. But it's a really important thing to teach students how to just kind of get beyond that and liberate themselves a little bit and just go for something and to put themselves into something. One of the projects I had my kids do yesterday in the improv class, I wanted them to take a set of chord changes and basically chords from a piece of music, and I wanted them to write out a solo. So basically improvise at snail's pace. You know, normally you would improvise on the spot and compose on the spot, and I had them write out a solo. So they had, you know, a week to think about what they would play over these chords. And to hear some of the things that they came up with was so cool, you know, and it's part of them, and they're proud of what they came up with, you know, and you can see it when they play it, and it's just it's something you don't get anywhere else. And I think that's why jazz education, you know, I'm a huge advocate for that, obviously, but you know, helping to show other people that, yeah, even if you're not going to be a jazz musician that's not your profession, you can still really benefit from the skills that you learn through, you know, attempting to play the music and figure out what it's all about. So, yes, sir.
Do you ever hear the words of a strain that you're composing about? Do the words,
The lyrics?
lyrics come through to you?
Yeah, absolutely. But as long as I know them, sometimes I'm playing a tune and I don't know the words, and so then they can't. But if I know the lyrics, yeah. And they say, you know, some of the best jazz musicians say you have to know the words. You have to know all of them. If you're learning a melody, learn the lyrics, because that teaches you what, you know. Otherwise, you could think the song was about, you know, I don't know, a summer day or something, and really it was about something really dark, or you know, I don't know. And so knowing the lyrics can kind of help fuel your ideas for improvising and playing around, and even just how you play the melody, you know, can make a big difference. Yes.
Do you have a jazz concert coming up here at school?
I'm glad you asked.
Now.
Yeah, thank you. My plant. We have a number of events coming up next week, as a matter of fact. Well, because I'm a saxophonist as well, we have a really, really fine classical saxophonist coming Wednesday evening at 7:30. It's a free concert in the Fine Arts Theater. His name is Dr. Stephen Page. He was a colleague of mine in Iowa, and he's one of the top classical saxophonists of his generation, probably one of the top in the world right now. So he's entered global competitions and taken first, second, third place at many of them, and just amazing control of this instrument. And he's going to come down, and he's giving a lecture at 1:15 in the afternoon, and then a performance at 7:30 Wednesday evening in the Fine Arts Theater. Yeah, that's February 8th. And then 2 days later, we have many of my colleagues and friends from the University of Iowa are coming down. The University of Iowa Jazz faculty is on a little tour of the greater area, and I convinced them to stop by here, and they're going to be giving a concert that evening, February 10th, Friday evening at 7:30. And I'll be playing on that concert with them, as will our string bass instructor, Ben Wheeler from Jefferson College here. So Ben and I will be playing, and then John Rapson from Iowa on piano, Brent Sandy on trumpet, Steve Grismore on guitar, and Jim Dreyer on the drums. So that should be a good concert. And then the best, if you're going to come to only one, come to this one. We have on March 8th, it's a Thursday evening, Wycliffe Gordon from the Wynton Marsalis Septet is going to be here playing with our big band, with our students. And he's giving a free clinic that afternoon at 4 o'clock, and then the concert will be 7:30 as well. And these are all free, so please come out, tell your friends, neighbors, strangers, and help promote music. We've got a lot of cool stuff that's happening that I'm trying to get the word out about here, so you can help me out with that. Yes.
Would you see any value in music students taking an elementary physics course in which, in a unit on sound, they learn about fundamental frequencies, combinations, bands?
Absolutely, absolutely. In our music theory class, we talk about some of those, the properties of sound and the relationship between different intervals and why some intervals sound dissonant, two notes struck together, and why some sound more consonant and things like that. I think it's hugely beneficial for them. And then just the acoustical properties of their own instrument, understanding how your own instrument works and functions allows you to problem solve. If you're getting, this reed isn't playing right, I don't quite understand why. Well, if you have some of that background, it can help with that. So.
Is that going to be a concert? Are they going to be in the leader?
Yes,
Roger? Yes, they will.
They'll be in the leader. You can also go to the Jefferson College website. It's www.jeffco.edu. So you'll find them there. And you look pretty hip. If you go to Facebook, you'll also find them on Facebook. So, but yes, they will be in the leader.
Yes.
Want to talk about the one concert that you will be playing that isn't free but supports the college?
Yes, please.
That will be April 21st. It will be our Jazz and Jeans Foundation fundraiser. It will be in the field house. But you will get to hear Joel and his students perform all evening. They did this last year. Great response. It's really exciting to see what our students are doing today, and of course supports a great cause. And then last but not least, as we close out the hour, I'm kind of hoping you'll close with a melody as well.
Sure, I can do that. Oh, one other thing I just wanted to say, Shirley has a question. Do we have time?
It's a quick question.
Yeah, please.
Would you tell us about the Missouri Jazz Quartet and what that means?
Sure. I play in a classical saxophone quartet with a few other folks from around the state. Leo Sagigi, who's the head of saxophone studies at Mizzou, and Adrian Honnold, who's a saxophone professor up at UMSL, and then Matt Kendrick, who is out in Kansas City. We have a quartet, and we just recently found out we were accepted to perform at the World Saxophone Congress in Scotland this summer, which is a cool honor. Thanks, Shirley. Also, for many of you who live in the area, I'm assuming, and if you haven't yet been there, you should get out to my favorite dining establishment in Hillsborough, Cool Beans Java Cafe. The last Tuesday of every month, we will be hosting a jazz jam session there too. So if anyone wants to come check, the last Tuesday of every month, from 5:30 to 7:30. So you can, and they'll be serving their whole menu. And we had our first one this past Tuesday, and had a really nice time doing that. So please come. What's that?
What's the name of the restaurant again?
It's called Cool Beans Java Cafe.
Okay.
It's on Locust, I believe, kind of by the courthouse or something. Is that right? Yeah. Yes?
For those of us who teach and want to give extra credit for your upcoming jazz concerts, will you have a printed program that students can get signed?
For many of the concerts we will, sometimes we will not, but if they come talk to me or one of the other music faculty, we can arrange to get them something if they'd like.
For extra credit.
Sure, of course.
Could you run through those dates again? Go fast.
Yes. Let's see. Well, starting next week, February 8th, Wednesday night, that's Stephen Page, the classical saxophone recital. It'll be saxophone and piano. And then Friday, February 10th, is the University of Iowa Jazz Faculty Concert. March 8th is Wycliffe Gordon with our jazz program. That's at 7:30 on March 8th. And then the Jazz and Jeans Foundation event is April 21st, and that's a Saturday, starting, I think, 6, somewhere around there. And then the last Tuesday of every month, over at Cool Beans. All right, I'll play one a little. First one I played was kind of up tempo, so I'll close with a ballad. This is one of my favorite ballads. It's a Duke Ellington composition called "In a Sentimental Mood."
Thank you.